morning, everybody. I'm not going to talk about politics. I am, on the other hand, going to talk about what makes a 21st century brand. It's about time that we defined what a 21st century brand was, right? Because it's now 2020 next year. And what I've done in order to think about what my opinion is actually to think about what the IPA effectiveness was said. So I judged them for the first time last year as deputy convener, and it meant that I read all of them, and I read many of them, of course, more than once. And overall, that was like reading, look, as I counted the number of words, The Lord of the Rings plus The Hobbit on more than one occasion over a very exciting few weeks, obviously with less dragons, very few rings of gold. And one of the things that I took out of it was that there are at least a dozen ways to build resilience for a brand in the 21st century, things that you didn't have to think about in the 20th century. Now, what I'm going to do, because I've only got 10 minutes, is rattle through them, but I'm going to refer you each time to an IPA effectiveness case study, all of which is available, of course, on the Walk site and the IPA site. I'm going to kick off by talking about the hideousness of binary thinking. It's one of the issues that indeed is a curse of many of the things that are wrong with our country at the moment, but it is also one of the curses of our industry. So Campaign, lovely Campaign, are still holding, I'm sure, very popular breakfast briefings where they go, brand versus performance, the marketer's dilemma. Is that the marketer's dilemma? No, I don't think so. It's not an either or, is it? It's an and. And in fact, as we find through the course of this, my reading of the IPA Effectiveness Awards, it's not just either or instead of instead of either or. It's and. So the first couple of things that you now have to consider are obviously all four quadrants of this Boston grid. So in my view, there are only two good forms of advertising. That's it. There is advertising that builds desire, and there is advertising that harvests demand. It's as simple as that. And there are traditional rules, the rules that we are all used to, the heuristics that we are all used to, and then there are new rules. There are too many of us that are thinking in just one of these quadrants. We have to have a helicopter view across all four of the quadrants. We have to understand where the traditional rules are still true, where they should be extended into new rules, and where, in fact, the new rules should be rewriting the traditional rules. So if you like, that's the first two of my dozen. Now I'm going to rattle through the rest of them. What I saw in the awards was some reference to diversity. The strongest paper that talked about this was the Army with the This Is Belonging campaign, and I urge you to read it. Interestingly, and of course, as Stephen said, it's sort of my specialist subject in some ways to think about diversity. What the paper talks about is diversity in terms of targeting and communication. Where I think we need to actually be thinking is about diversity behind the scenes as well. So the people who are shooting the ads, the people who are not just on screen, but behind the cameras. Purpose. There's nothing new about purpose. It seemed to be one of the most contentious issues in the judging rooms that I was in the IPA, interestingly. This is Andrew Carnegie, who was a very rich entrepreneur, obviously originally from Scotland, made his fortune in America. And he said, a man who dies rich dies in shame. And he spent a lot of his money reinvesting in philanthropy, both in the US and in the United Kingdom. The strongest purpose paper that I can quote is probably the Barclays paper, where they actually made a case that the Digital Eagles campaign had not just created differentiation for them, but also done a great deal in terms of the employer branding. Friction. The brands that win in the 21st century, the brands that take friction out of the buying, they make e-commerce easy, they ensure that every part of the brand is reflected in the brand experience. Ella's Kitchen is a great case study of this. It's about their use of their CRM database to make a major switch from broadcast advertising into tailored communications for new parents. There is a lot of talk in panels, you probably will have been to them, and lots of conferences about the personalisation of data. It is very clear from the IPA Effectiveness Awards from last time that it is important not only to personalise data, but also to still stay true and up close and personal and emotional with your audience. So the Weetabix with the beautifully named paper, A Rembrandt in the Attic. I think Rembrandt might have been pushing it a bit, but they certainly found something in the attic, was a very strong case for going back to the core of a brand and its emotional connection with its audience. On the right, you see left. My right, your left. On the left, you see IKEA, where they actually personalised advertising for a huge number of usage occasions. Being a strong part of culture is a very strong part of what makes the 21st century brand epic. Television, of course, is still a fabulous brand builder in that respect. That's why I've put a picture up with a man with a telly on his head. The Guinness Compton Cowboys is a great story of being leveraging culture and also becoming part of culture over the long term. Use of data is inevitably something that is extremely important these days. And 32 Red, one of the uses of Ant and Dec in the awards, is a great example and a very clear and specific example about how they've used data to leverage their business. You've got to consider partnering. You've got to consider partnering in an open source way. One of the more unusual entries, because it was all about sponsorship and partnership, and I think in ways that broke the mold, actually, was the Suzuki and ITV partnership, best use of Ant and Dec. And then I haven't put US or CX, or I've just put X, because experience is now something that the marketer has to consider. It is not enough for the marketing director or the CMO to sell the sizzle, not the steak. They've got to be concerned about the steak, about the selling of the steak, the purchasing of the steak, and how the steaks after sales go. There's a couple of examples of this. One is from Mars, where they took the Skittles Pride, taking the rainbow off the pack logo in store, which also made enthused the store buyers. The other one, and one of my favourite kind of gorgeous little IPA entries, which again I urge you to read, was this is the Art Institute of Chicago. They had a Van Gogh exhibition, so what they did, of course, was build a Van Gogh bedroom that you could go and stay in Chicago, and advertised it on Airbnb. There are no examples for my 11th example, because brand safety is something that all brand marketeers and agencies have to consider now. At MediaCom, we consider that we are in the business of risk management, and Claire spoke very profoundly this morning about how this is now an issue that a strong brand has to consider, which really it gave very little thought to in the last century. And then finally, integrated media and messaging. As convener of the 2020 awards, I'd like to call for two things. I'd like to call for a wider variety of entries. Catherine Kay and I hosted a round table at the IPA just a couple of weeks ago, where there were many people from agencies who were surprised at the variety of entries, which is one of the reasons I've touched on them today, that actually won awards. So people didn't expect to see awards won for data or for CRM or for sponsorship. This is a call really for any award that involves effectiveness, have a go at entering it. But secondly, I would like to see more integrated media and messaging. The reason I've put up a Victoria sponge cake for this is because I'm very good at making Victoria sponge cakes, and we all like cake. But I also sometimes think, whoever looked at those ingredients, the flour, the sugar and the butter, and went, we can get this out of it. I mean, it's just awesome. The whole really is stronger than the sum of the parts. And so that is also true of some of the great entries. And the Grand Prix winner deserves a mention here, where clearly that was the case. And the integrated creative and messaging really stood out. There are lots of other award winners that I could have mentioned, but I haven't got time today. I think the point is that it's not either or, it's and it's all at the same time. Wow, I did it in 10 minutes. I know it was a bit of a dash through, but I am around for questions. And of course, the IPA data bank is there, and the awards are launching this Friday at MediaCom. Very exciting.